Happy Saturday, everyone. Hopefully you're all here. Just give ready a couple seconds to get ready here. This is another live show. We are live on YouTube, so good to see all of you. Give ready a few seconds here to get gathered in. Hope you all are having a great weekend with your families. Enjoying a little bit of Americana out there. I think it's an important thing to do. We have severely lost our ways as a society at large, and a little bit of Americana is never a bad thing for any of us. It's always a good thing for us to reconnect with what made America great and what will make America great in the future. So I'll get started here as we go. Welcome, everybody, to the Rice Report. My name is Eric Rice. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for sharing, for being here, for paying attention, and most importantly, for taking the information that's given to you here, doing a little research and having some good conversations with people you know and you love. I mean, that's the entire purpose of what we're trying to do, is just get information out to you. I'm not going to go super deep into deep dives. There are certainly other people who do that. I think the most important thing about information is how you apply it to your life, how you apply it to the way you live, how you apply it to the people you meet. And we try to keep things very simple, very concise, and I try to educate as much as I can about very complex situations. And maybe the most complex situation in the world is understanding government funding. Now, what we call this in economics is our plumbing. You know, the plumbing of the United States, the plumbing of the ecosystem within the government, and the way that the economy works within the government is maybe the most complex thing to understand outside of how the FICO score or the stock market work. All three of these things are exceptionally complex, but it's important to know that government spending has nothing to do with the viability of the future of this country. The left or the communists in this country will continually just say, we'll spend money on this, we'll spend money on that, and it's going to make everything better. That after $35 trillion has proven to be a complete fallacy. So we're going to walk into that first. We're going to go into a lot of politics today. And most importantly, we're going to be covering the Diddy situation, because I think it's one that, you know, there's many different audiences out there. There are some who've been in the trenches down the rabbit holes for 10 years, 5 years, 30 years in some cases. These shows are probably pretty boring to you. I'm one of you. I certainly don't want to scare away those who've never been down a rabbit hole and those who have been down a couple rabbit holes. But I trust that you can see that rabbit holes are very apparent today. They are very useful. And what I try to do is slow walk through them and allow all audiences to be able to take tactical and practical information from the world at large today and be able to present that with people that they know, so that more and more people get curious about what it is that's actually happening in the world, because we are going through a tremendous amount of turmoil. And in my last few episodes, I've walked through an interview from 1984 from a KGB agent who said over and over again that the communist construct to take over a nation is to demoralize, destabilize, create a crisis, and then normalize a new life. And we continually heard through the Obama administration, the new normal. This is the new normal. This is the new normal. I know we're moving all of our industry, all of our manufacturing overseas, and that your fathers, your grandfathers, your brothers, your brother-in-laws, they're not going to have jobs, and that's okay, because this is the new normal, and it's going to be good for you because eventually you're going to have cheap Chinese products and all of our money goes over. That's the new normal. That was ineffective. Trump was an absolute wrecking ball to that mission, and he is the only person who's actually increased manufacturing jobs, which are vital to an economy and a society. You know, things we make are important, but people making those things on our soil is far more important. Number one, we have more money going into the system in this country. We have more wages going to people in this country, and that money gets spent on other companies within the country. So manufacturing, though it was downplayed and still downplayed by Democrats on a daily basis, is the most important function, because above all of that I just listed, the most important thing about self-manufacturing in our country is the fact that we can actually live and survive on our own without dependency upon another nation for our own success. So that tirade aside, let's hop into, right off the bat, into the budgets. It's very important to track this. I know a lot of people are saying, I know the government spends too much money, it's so boring. I try to walk through these things and not only explain to you why it's happening, how it's bad, what it's affecting, but how you can profit from it. And that's an area where people just simply don't. Everyone looks at a crisis and puts their head in the sand, but that's simply not the truth. When crisis arises, those who are smart and who are prepared and who are brave can make exceptional amounts of generational wealth. And even if you don't have a lot of money, you can't make generational wealth, you can at least make something instead of losing everything. And I think it's so crucial to talk about these things. I talk about the economy all the time. Many people consider me an economist. I consider myself just a guy in a hoodie. Think of me any way you'd like. I just want to be someone who helps in your life. I want to be someone who brings knowledge to you and allows for you to have a platform that you can ask questions, that you can get answers, more importantly, and answers that you can understand. I think that's so crucial in today's world. So right off the bat, recent numbers came in this past week that the current budget deficit, and that's the deficit between the cash we have and the cash we owe for the budgets that we have in place. So think of it like your home. You have, for example, you have, say, your total budget for mortgage or rent, groceries, car insurance, all the other forced tax insurances, which are taxes, childcare, school supplies, gasoline, all that stuff, your budget. A budget deficit means if your budget is $5,000 a month and you have $4,000 a month, you have a $1,000 budget deficit. In August, just August of 2024, we have a $380 billion budget deficit within the government. That is a $12 billion a day budget deficit, $12 billion per day deficit. That is up 66% from last August. These are numbers that should shock every single person who hears them, regardless of what you think is coming and what you think the future will hold. And I think the future is going to hold severe pain and then tremendous amounts of bliss, because I can see the transformation. I get little tidbits every day of a new paradigm shift. You know, everyone thinks they have it figured out. They do not. In fact, most of the things people think they have figured out are almost impossible to actually be put into place. Not to say that they're wrong, just they're statistically very difficult to do. So let's look at things logically and try to walk everything backwards step by step to see what happens in the future. So 66% increase in budget deficit for the month of August from last year. We had just recently on Tuesday and Wednesday, the government printed $82 billion. That's $41 billion per day without your authorization, without your approval, and without any sort of public disclosure in grand format. Now, if you borrow, think of your kids. If your kids wanted to borrow $100 and just took it out of your wallet, you'd be pretty mad. But if they asked if they could borrow $100, you may or may not give it to them. You have the option. Here is an American citizen, a cattle on a tax farm. You have no option. The government can print and pull money anytime they want without telling you, and in the end, the IRS is going to come asking for you to pay it back. This is the travesty of living in a central bank tax farm, which is exactly what every nation on planet Earth is at the current point in time. Now, along with this massive amount of spending, we have to look at everything else. Bankruptcies, these are corporate bankruptcies. These are larger small businesses and mid-sized businesses. In some cases, large businesses like Tupperware are now declaring bankruptcy in this country, wiping out their debt, moving operations to Mexico to go from a domestic producing manufacturing company in America to becoming just another import-export operation in a foreign nation. These things are going to kill this country in many different ways that many people do not calculate. In an episode a while back, I told you I grew up right by a Ford plant, and when I was a kid, the town was called Ford Heights. It was a tremendous town. And by the time I was a teenager, that Ford plant had shut down, and you could literally buy crack at the liquor store. It was a travesty to see what happened in that town, and that is spreading throughout the United States with the shutdown of manufacturing. Manufacturing jobs, by the way, haven't seen a pay increase in 3 years while inflation has run rampant. So even those who are still working are working more hours and being taxed on overtime, which Trump has promised to get rid of. And I think tax on overtime should have been, I think taxes of all sort in the economy we live in should be evaporated. They do not go. I just did a presentation for a bunch of investors, and I very rarely check the chat while I'm talking on presentations. But one of them, we were talking about Bitcoin and avoiding taxes. And one person said, I would rather pay taxes so I could support the United States. Respectfully, and I don't know who that person is, and I don't know if they're watching this episode, respectfully, that is one of the more ignorant statements that any human being can make in this country. 0% of your federal tax dollars go to any road, any school, any structure at all in this country. In fact, almost all of it goes to interest payments back to a central bank who is a private corporation that doesn't belong on our soil whatsoever. And hopefully we will see a reinvention of Andrew Jackson, who was the last president who kicked out the central bank from this country. Now, keeping in line with this stuff, we know government deficit spending, interest, all that. Our interest, we spend more on interest for the loans that the United States takes from the central bank, the Federal Reserve, than we do on defense right now. Really think about that. This is literally the most violent powder keg in the history of the United States, and we spend more money on interest payments than we do in the defense sector. Big thing to watch. Net U.S. savings, that's net. So this is not gross. This is net U.S. savings. This week came out between homes, businesses, and governments. And now the government net savings is the percentage of the amount of savings the government has that it uses towards the GDP. So this is cash on hand that they could say, we have this cash, add it to the GDP. It's part of the bylaws. They can certainly do that. But U.S. net savings between households, businesses, and the government are down for their sixth consecutive quarter. That is 6 straight quarters, otherwise known as 18 consecutive months or a year and a half. The last time that we saw these types of drops in savings was 2008. Again, 2008. So along with this, we also have the Federal Reserve structure of interest rates. The fact that we have interest rates, and by the way, interest rates are a percentage charged on a loan, right? So the way it works is the Federal Reserve, which owns this country, whether you want to believe that or not, they own this nation because they own the money supply. Like every tyrant in the history of the world has always said, if you own the money, you own the country. The Federal Reserve prints the money. They own the money. That's a fact. And the Federal Reserve, what they do is they loan money to the government. So what they do is they install politicians who are great salesmen who can tell, tall tales about how this new money will help the spending of this country when in reality, all that's happening is they're borrowing money, taking their 10%, shifting it off to their crony capital buddies, getting another kickback through a foreign nation and third-party advocates like Switzerland and Morocco and places that they can hide money. And then that money gets wasted because everything is overcharged. You almost never get any benefit from government spending except you feel good. So we have a major part of this country that votes because of the way they feel, and I hope that that ends in the coming time. But the way that this works pretty simply is the government will install people that have constituents that they're in charge of. So it really doesn't matter whether you agree with them or not. Once they're in office, they own your opinion. So they drop all these loans, and essentially the government says, hey, we need $100 billion. And the Federal Reserve says, great, we'll buy $100 billion of your debt. We now own your nation for another $100 billion. That's simply how it works. It's a gigantic loan sharking scheme. And in this, they control the supply of money. So the more money, the more the monetary supply is inflated, creating inflation. The cheaper money becomes, the more expensive tangible goods become. Basic inflation 101. Now, this past week, they lowered interest rates by 0.5 point. Now, to someone looking to borrow money, someone who has a credit card, someone who's looking for a new mortgage, this is great news. You'll be able to borrow more money. Just know, as soon as you get that mortgage, more money gets printed. As soon as you borrow from a credit card, more money gets printed. It's a vicious cycle that almost never ends. And to be frank with you, that 0.5% drop in interest rates will equate to, historically, 2001 and 2007 are the last two examples we have of a 0.5 point rate drop. And in those examples, the stock market went down, the S&P went down 39%, and unemployment jumped by 2.5%. In 2007, stock market went down 53%, unemployment jumped 5.4%. In all aspects of my reality, I anticipate somewhere in the middle of that happening in a very simple manner, and something possibly worse with more bad news. So pay attention to that. It's really important. You can make good decisions during these times as long as you change your paradigm, your thought process, and the way that you normally think through money. These are not normal times. More importantly, when interest rates drop like that, it opens up the door for more government printing, which they need to do right now in order to save the banks. And I'll get into that in just a moment. Retail sales. This is a huge indicator of the actual success of a country. I've spoken about this many times. People look at government budgets, and I do too. I look at all this stuff. But most people, investors, look at corporate spending and other types of things. What really matters is retail sales. There are 350 million legal people in this country and another 40 million people who aren't legal. So that's almost 400 million people in this country, making us a very large nation. Most corporations, which drives the value in the stock market, the perceived value of a company based on how much money they make, that's why earnings reports are a big thing. Those companies derive their value from retail spending. Now, the retail spending numbers are another confusing area that I want people to understand thoroughly. There are two numbers that exist. The first one is all spending. So if you look at all spending in retail sales, that's up 15.2% over the past 3 years. Okay, that's just money being spent into the retail market. But if you look at actual retail sales growth, it's 0.1%. That's due to the adjustment from inflation. So what's happening in retail, and pay attention to who you follow with financial news for your portfolio, because those who are touting this number of, well, retail sales is up 15.2%. Great. What's the inflation adjusted number? That's 0.1%. We are watching a point, and I'm telling you all this information because in about 35 days or 40 days from now, we're going to have the release of the October GDP report, which is going to be one of the largest financial reports in the history of this country. Normally, there are things that fly by you don't pay attention to. I want everyone to pay attention to this because it will determine the next 6 months of economic activity in America, period, point blank. So if our retail sales sector is only growing at 0.1% adjusted through inflation, that's the number to look at. Because yes, people are spending more money. That the amount of money being spent on retail goods has increased 15.2% over the past 3 years, but the actual sales growth is only 0.1%. That tells you at a very bare minimum that the actual inflation rate in this country is around 14%. So look through the numbers and so these numbers just indicate that people aren't buying more things, they're just paying more money. That's it, point blank. You're still buying the same loaf of bread, you're still buying the same carton of eggs, but now they cost more. So your simp economist, the one who desires to create a living being on CNBC and people paying him to look through government reports without actually critically thinking or understanding the world at large, they're going to tout this tremendous number, 15.2% growth in retail sales. But if you adjust it for inflation, it's 0.1%. It's a dismal number. It might as well be negative at this point. Very important to pay attention to. Existing home sales. This is another area that a lot of people get confused about. Existing home sales. These are not new home sales. New home sales mean a newly built home for sale. Existing homes are a home that already exists and someone lives in it. That number is actually dropping significantly right now. In fact, it dropped 2.5% with a 1.3% expectation. These are the lowest numbers we've seen in existing home sales since 2010. That is 1 year after the official declaration of the financial crisis, where most people were just trying to save their home and there was no buyers available. So those numbers are as low as 2010. In fact, the only time numbers have been around this low were in 1990. Now, in 1990, the population of this country was about 30% less. We've grown significantly as a country in the past, significantly in the past, 30, 40 years. So even 1990, we saw the same level of existing home sales as we saw in 2010, and we're now seeing it again here in 2024. First-time home buyers of these existing homes is 26%. Normally, this number is much higher. 26% is the all-time low for a month of existing homes being purchased by first-time home buyers. So what the heck does all this mean, Eric? It means pretty simply that people are spending so much on retail goods, they're spending far more on the same goods they bought 3 years ago, that they don't have enough money to buy a first-time home. What it also tells me is that existing home buyers realize that the mortgage rates are so much higher than they were when they bought previously or refinanced, that financially they also cannot upscale in home. Many people, I asked in one of my last episodes, I said, what is the American culture? What is the American dream? Can you define it anymore? Now, politicians will define it as owning your own home. That shouldn't be an American dream. That should be an American reality. However, we live on a tax farm that's owned and operated by a central bank, so money continually is worth less, and we have to earn more of it to be able to buy the same things. This is what's happening in America from the economic perspective. And to be honest with you, there's only a few life rafts. Now, I've talked about the VIX or UVIX, not financial advice, not telling you what to do. But eventually, this market is going to drop significantly and the VIX will shoot up. These are a good place to put short-term money to make trades. Always have been, always will be. Now, the stock market itself, right now, I've talked about the stock market ad nauseum. I am not a stock investor. I pulled completely out of stocks in 2021. The only stock I'll purchase is the VIX, and all I do is I wire money, I make the trade, I make my profit, I wire it out, I keep the profit on the table, and I let it ride. That's it. That's all I do. You can do as you please. However, the stock market, I've talked about, I just went through the numbers of a 50 basis point drop in federal interest rates and the historical performance afterward. Now, most people don't know that because they don't pay attention. They don't have the time to research. I mean, that's an important thing. When you're living on this tax farm run by a central bank, they're sucking out all your time and talents and ultimately your treasures just to keep up with inflation. You're forced to gamble to outpace poor economic policy by governments and banks. That is the reality of today. However, there are life rafts. And before I get into the life rafts, which I believe, again, not financial advice in any possible way, but before I do that, let's classify the American dream. It's something I want you to all think about. What is the American dream today? It's going to be far different than it was 30 years ago, yet today we're still hearing the same dream. I want to own my own home. That term, that association of just owning a home and having a family being the American dream is from the 1950s. In the 1950s, it was still difficult to buy lumber. We have lumber yards full of wood right now. We have concrete companies everywhere. It's much easier to build a home. Building a home and affording a home should be easy, but what is the American dream? Before you can determine that, you got to figure out where you stand. Most recent statistics from YF Research came out basically classifying Americans. And these numbers are staggering, to be honest with you. To be classified today as upper middle class, the average considered to be upper middle class, their average net worth, and this isn't income, this is net worth. This is what they're totally worth. That's home equity plus cash. Easy way to think of it. Upper middle class, you have a net worth of about $300,000. True middle class, $169,000, and lower middle class, $58.5 thousand. These numbers are staggering when you start looking at the upper class. When you look at Shohei Ohtani on the Los Angeles Dodgers, just signed a contract for $700 million to play baseball. Joel Embiid from the Philadelphia 76ers just signed a 4-year contract for $300 million to play basketball, to promote sneakers made by 9-year-olds in China. There is something wrong in this country, and sin and demoralization have become commonplace. So while most people, you look at CEOs of companies, do research on the CEOs of companies. Your average large company CEO makes 50, 60 million a year. You got football players, actors, musicians. We're going to get into those in just a minute. These compensation levels are created to create idolatry in a society, which violates all laws of God. In fact, that's why a tribe of Israel was kicked out of the tribes of Israel for idolatry worship. That was the tribe of Dan, if you're interested. However, what we're watching right now is in the last 4 years, we have seen almost a $1 trillion money grab through ESG with companies like BlackRock, who, by the way, while they're promoting you to save the world and become ESG friendly, which no one can define, they're out in the background buying oil and gas fields in Texas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Montana, even in California and some parts of Utah. That is what BlackRock is doing while they're on television, making you feel horrible about polluting the economy. By the way, when they filmed that commercial, they took a private jet and polluted the economy or the environment. But while that's happening, they're literally in the background buying oil and gas fields, knowing that oil and gas is going to be a big boom for them eventually. Now, the secrets behind this stuff are being leaked because there's actually independent scientists who have done studies who have shown that the world is not, there is no global warming and climate change. This is now statistically proven that the world is now cooling. We are cooling. So put this scam together in your own mind. I'm BlackRock. I tell you that the world is massively heating up, that it's going to boil. I think, I forgot who it was, but a nation came out and said, if we don't stop climate change, the earth is going to boil. They said that in 2022 is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But they're telling you this. They're telling you that. So while they're telling you that, they're buying oil and gas fields. You don't need oil and gas to do air conditioning. That's done through coal. You need oil and gas to heat homes. That's the most specific use of natural gas in this country that most people associate it with, is heating homes. So pay attention to the fruits of the tree and not the words of the tree, and you'll be much, much better off. Now, and that is with sectors of things, right? So sometimes they tell the truth, of course, because if they lied all the time, they would never get away with lying. Pay attention to that. Use discernment. It's very important. In the energy sector, I just found it interesting. I found this scientific report this last week that really proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the global climate is actually cooling and not heating, and it has been for about 12 years now. So interesting things to break through those paradigms. We are approaching a government shutdown, the bill to save the government budget, which is so ridiculous. Think of yourself as a business owner with a management team, because we are the business owners of America. We're theoretically supposed to be the business owners of America as citizens. Imagine you as the business owner sat with your management team and you sat down and you said, you know what? You guys are running a $380 billion budget deficit spending just this month. You're $35 trillion in debt and you can't afford your bills, but you want me to pay your salaries? Really? Now, they do this every 6 or 7 months because they only finance themselves for 6 or 7 months so that they can waste a bunch of time trying to finance themselves again. By the way, most people in Congress, little known fact for those who don't spend time researching, most people in Congress are worth at least $10 million or more, and almost all of them went into Congress with a net worth of less than $2 million. How do they do that on $174,000 a year? They do it through these types of spending measures. So right now we are on pace for a government shutdown in October, a 30-day shutdown. We've heard this before. We've heard this story 1,000 times, and we're going to hear it again for the next 2 or 3 weeks. The sob stories of how this nation can't run without the government, which is complete BS. Most of it is bulk spending, pork spending that doesn't do anything but fill the mouths and the wallets of those abroad and those here who are closest to the money printer. But we're going to hear this sob story. But they are set to shut down 30 days from now. In fact, the entire calendar for Congress is completely clear. It's public knowledge. You can go check it anywhere you like. Completely clear at this moment in time. I actually expect this to happen, which is very odd right before an election. 30 days of no government. Let's see how that works out. I bet everyone will be happier. And by the way, inflation should drop if there is no government, but it won't. It'll increase. That's a guarantee because they just drop rates. So while they're not formally doing anything, they're still going to, work on their own without compensation to make sure that they have enough time to get more bills passed that cost the American taxpayer money and print more money into the circulation of the entire monetary supply. Those things will happen, but they will tell you that, toll roads won't work and federal agencies, which do nothing for this country anyway, will shut down. It's important to note that. And before we get into Diddy, which is the main topic. I love weekend Rice Report lives because we get to let the gloves off, let the hair down a little bit. But I want to cover Trump. So one of the important things, it should be clear to anybody with a logical brain that it's Trump or nothing. I mean, it should be at this point in time. And if it's not yet, we should note 2 important endorsements. Over the past week, the United Auto Workers, they actually endorsed no one. Now, the head of the auto worker spoke at the Republican National Convention. That was the first time any head of that union had spoke at a Republican convention in at least 50 years. I don't remember the exact time, but they're pretty much a Democrat stronghold. Almost every year that union votes Democrat, period. Most unions vote Democrat, period. Now, they have endorsed no one, which might as well be an endorsement for Donald Trump because 68% of the auto workers have noted that they will be voting for Donald Trump. So politics isn't as easy as being a normal person. They can't just come out and say, we're endorsing Trump. They still have to appease those who give them, drum roll please, federal funding for the things that they do. Yes, that is correct. The central bank is a piggy bank for the corrupt who manage and manipulate an entire farm of cattle to make sure that they can squeeze as much milk out of you while they drink as much as they can. That is how the world works today. So that's important. The other endorsement for Kamala Harris, huge endorsement for Harris today. The IRS Workers Union has now endorsed Kamala Harris. Let's talk about the IRS a little bit, shall we? The IRS started out as a Delaware corporation in its early infant stages, But through persecution from those who love to live by the Constitution, it was quickly realized that federal income tax actually violates the original Constitution. And over about a period of 5 years, enough pressure was put upon them where they relocated to Puerto Rico. That's right. Some of you, your beloved IRS, who you think does the right thing by you, is nothing more than a tax collector for Rome in the times of Jesus. They are actually not an American corporation. They are registered in the island of Puerto Rico, which is an American territory, but not part of America officially. I think it's important to note. So how does a foreign country or foreign corporation that's no different than Microsoft, they are not a government agency, they are a private corporation as well, how do they have such a stranglehold upon this country, upon your money and upon your future, and ultimately upon your freedom? Now, they have organized, and I didn't even know this till today, that I didn't even know that there was an IRS workers union. I had no idea that they had unionized. They have weaponized themselves as a political pundit to solidify their ability to steal from you openly. Now, YouTube won't like this at all, but I'll challenge any of you to dig through the IRS code, because I've done it about 5 times, and show me exactly where it says you are mandated to pay taxes. What you will find in the IRS code is that you are mandated to file taxes, and it will also say there in clear language that payment is voluntary. So those are facts, and of course this will be fact-checked by everyone. If you put it on Twitter, you'll be community noted, because politics is a delicate game, especially in politics, where if you say things that are true, sometimes you end up dead, most of the time you end up broke. And this is happening all across the board, including Donald Trump, who just came out with an idea a few days ago at a rally saying, you know what I want to do as president? I want to cap credit card rates at 10%. I've been talking about credit card rates, credit card debt for a very long time on here. If you followed me for any duration, you'll understand that, because it's important to understand the overall impact on the American people. That's who I care about. I do not care about anyone in a foreign country right now. I don't. I can't lend money to another family unless my family is solvent. We are not solvent, and right now we need to fix our problems. This is a good step in the right direction. Here's how credit card debt works for those of you who never broke it down. We are currently $1.2 trillion in credit card debt as a country. The average income or the average interest rate on credit card debt right now is around 21.95%. So let's be kind. Some people are paying 30. If you have bad credit, you might be paying close to 40. I've seen credit card statements personally at 39.99% right now. These are incredible numbers. You borrow $1,000 over the course of that year, you're going to owe $1,400 back. And the American people, from the numbers I've just given you, which are from registered agencies, they do not have the money to even pay back the principal, yet alone principal and interest. So 1.2 trillion, let's just be kind and say 1 trillion at 20%. That's $200 billion a year of American money that goes in the pockets of credit card companies who do nothing but get money from the Federal Reserve and lend it to you. That is what's called usury. It's unbiblical and it's unpopular, but unfortunately at this point in time, it is very normalized in America. In fact, it's so normalized, I would challenge you to ask everyone you know and try to find a friend of yours that does not have a credit card. You probably won't be able to do that. There might be 1 out of every 10,000 people who doesn't have some form of credit. Credit was created alongside the same time that we went away from the gold standard. They knew what would happen, and they've lied to you about it ever since. So usury is an interesting topic to talk about, because there have been leaders around the world who have tried to end usury. Almost all of them have ended up dead. Really think about that. And if you want to know who they are, I'll certainly do another episode on that. But the other interesting thing about all world leaders who've tried to end usury, in our history books, they are the biggest villains. They are the ones that you are supposed to hate the most. You're supposed to hate the people who promoted free speech and a lack of usury in their nation. And I did an episode a while back about this. It is a very interesting rabbit hole to go down when you start studying villains and the actual fruits of what they have done in their life or what they tried to do in their life. But at the end of the day, those who have tried to end usury have all ended up dead, including JFK, who had the same model in mind, going to a silver-backed dollar and ending usury in this country. He was killed as well. Many other things. The JFK story for a certain generation is great president. He was executed. He was murdered on the street in a car, and just move on from there. There's another generation who wants to know who murdered him. There's another generation like mine who wants to know why he was murdered. And when you actually go down that rabbit hole and see the things that he was planning to do for this country, which are all incredible, you start to learn that, wow, the people who killed him, they killed a man who wanted to do what was right for the people. And that is a very consistent historical theme when you actually spend time outside of the propaganda news. Very interesting rabbit hole to go down. On top of this, Trump made a very interesting statement that some of you will understand and some of you will not yet. He said that at the end of the year, this country is going to have really big bank accounts. And thank you to Kim on my chat for bringing that up right before we got on here. You know, there is an executive order, I believe it's 13808 or 13828, that Donald Trump signed. And this executive order that he signed basically said, in layman's terms, if you are a participant in interfering with a U.S. election and you are found guilty, we are going to seize your assets. Now, that sounds cool, except for the fact that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have re-upped this executive order every year, including 2 weeks ago. This executive order is still law in this, not law, but an executive order mandate in this country currently. Now, a lot of people get excited about that. I do want to throw out I'm very much a look at both sides of a story type person. Yes, this could be used for anyone who interferes with elections, and we could steal their assets if we win and we prove that, which I think we will. However, on the flip side, if the tyrants get in office, they may be keeping this executive order in place for people like me who are out here talking about election fraud openly and being censored and I get these annoying emails from YouTube quite often telling me that certain content on here I shouldn't share. I'm going to share until you kick me off because this is the largest pool of people I can find. And when this time is over, this time is over. And we will go to Rumble, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn. Next week, I'll be on all those. Every episode we stream will be on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Rumble, and YouTube simultaneously. And the recordings will be available on iHeartRadio and all over the place. So make sure you're staying in touch there because eventually, over time, I will take the gloves off quite a bit more. Right now, I'm just trying to stay as low under the radar as I can, and it's moderately effective, I guess, at this point. But election fraud is certainly a topic we need to talk about, and I want to rewind the clock back to November of 2020. I watched the election. I watched votes drop, which isn't possible in a count. You're counting. Counting is always up. That is an addition problem. It is not a subtraction problem. I watched it live with my own eyes. Votes drop. And then I heard the excuses. Oh, it was a glitch. Oh, we have a water pipe bursting. Heard all the excuses. It was about 2.5 weeks later. Biden's named president. That's facts. Can't say anything around. I haven't made an accusation there yet either, which I certainly will. However, election fraud back then, I remember turning on CNN because I watched The Enemy. I think it's important for us to do. As horrible of a network as they are, as horrible of people as I want to know what they're telling those who don't research for themselves. I want to know so we can be impactful in sharing truth. If you don't know how to penetrate a lie, you'll absolutely never be able to inject truth. So I turned on all of the left-wing media and I heard a phrase that blew my mind. For 2 consecutive days, they repeated, Mockingbird Media repeated over and over again, election fraud isn't real. Election fraud isn't a thing. Despite the fact, even during 2020, almost 2,000 people were arrested and convicted on charges of election fraud. So election fraud is real, and they're gearing up all the engines they possibly can. Where we are right now, the Dominion voting machines are still in place. There's a couple of states trying to remove them. Georgia is doing some really good stuff right now. I hope it's a guilty conscience driving you from the 2020 election. But regardless, some certain counties and areas are doing a good job. That's where you're going to find change, by the way, folks. You're not going to change the federal government from your guest bedroom studio. You are going to change your local government first because you have power there. You are one of a few in your local area. You are one of many in a federal fight. So you want to take all this stuff to your local government. If every local municipality changed their voting laws and said, we're not using voting machines, we're doing a hand count, as they are doing in some states, We are less than 60 days away from the election. These laws need to be passed very rapidly. But unless we make those changes at the local level, the federal level, we're going to need a team of heroes to get that done. And I hope that there are real heroes. I really believe there are, because we're watching. If you're paying attention, you're watching the tide turn really, really slowly, but it definitely is turning. But election fraud is rampant, and now we have a whole new enemy. We have 21.5 million people, last estimate, of illegals that are in this country, and last estimate that I saw from a credible source was that about 14.5% of them are already registered to vote. That was last month. So let's assume that we have a 10% month-over-month growth rate for this number. So by the election, we're looking at, call it 20% of illegals. That's another 4 million people. If you remember back to 2016, Trump lost the overall general vote to Hillary Clinton by 3 million votes. So we now have more voters there that'll create the margin spread. Most of the black community, I believe, not most, but we'll have double the amount of black Republican voters that we had from the last election, about double the amount of Latinos. So they're looking to fill those gaps with illegals that they're bribing for a vote, who are now damaging buildings, households, taking lives, raping people, committing crimes left and right. And more importantly, I think the thing that most people don't equate, they are hijacking and stealing American culture, which has been completely destroyed over the past 4 decades. We went from mom, pop, and apple pie into sex, drugs, and hedonism. That is the new American culture. If you have a chance to, go on Twitter, go on TikTok, and look at videos of what people in other countries think of us. That's what American culture is being broadcast as. It's an absolute embarrassment to this nation. And until we wake up and make a change and get physically healthy, mentally strong, emotionally strong, mentally fit, and spiritually robust, this country will continue to decline. The problems that we have in society stem from a lack of faith. They stem when God is removed from a society so wholeheartedly. In fact, like usury, there's a topic. That's not biblical. You shouldn't be lending people money at interest. That's just become normalized in our society, and it's pretty clear who normalized it. But we will have this great moment very soon, I believe, where American people are going to go, what in the heck have we been doing as a society? Look at our children. We have less children than we've ever had in this country. The excuse of politicians is, well, our birth rate is so low, so we need to bring in these migrants to bring in workers to pick your fruit. Why is our birth rate so low? What's in our food? What's in our vaccines? What's in the jabs you give our children when they're born? What's in our alcohol? What's in our hearts? Marriage is an embarrassment. Paul Harvey in 1963 had it right. Get off of this episode when I'm done. Go right here on YouTube and Google Paul Harvey 1963, if I were the devil. If I were the devil, I would make marriage square and swinging cool. We have more swingers in this world than we can possibly imagine, especially in this country. A big topic that's going around right now is called sex parties, and we're now starting to hear more about P. Diddy. And P. Diddy and his freak-off parties and his, ain't no party like a Diddy party. Look at all the people who've said, ain't no party like a Diddy party, and you're going to find a heck of a rabbit hole. So let's go down that rabbit hole in its very highest level. There are many researchers, I don't want to steal their researcher, that are tying together exactly who would be involved in this. But P. Diddy is bringing up an interesting topic in this country, which is sexual deviance and corruption at the highest levels of entertainment, commerce, government. You can name any category, and those who are elite often have dirty secrets. And those secrets are sold in order to create power and influence for those who sell them. And we're starting to see that first with Jeffrey Epstein, now with P. Diddy, Sean Combs. Before I get into this, it's important to note that many people who have never had any experience researching this topic at all, number one, I'm not very confident talking about it because it's a topic that shouldn't exist. But I think most people will hear about P. Diddy because most have already forgotten about Epstein. It happened. He got caught. He killed himself. He didn't kill himself. I hope he's not dead because we've never actually seen his body, kind of like Osama bin Laden. We've never seen his body. They threw it off into an ocean. But Jeffrey Epstein by himself, this is an interesting thing to think about. The same coroner who did the final assessment on Jeffrey Epstein's body and told us that he hung himself in an 8x8 cell, he said that it was totally suicide, no other implications here whatsoever. He's also the same coroner who told us that, what was his name? George Floyd, that George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose. You know, you don't really get too many things more twisted than the George Floyd story and Jeffrey Epstein. Two most twisted stories. By the way, Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate has been talking quite a bit. There's only a few people on Substack that follow it. And he essentially has spilled the beans, and I'll let you read that on your own because I want to get more into Diddy today. So Diddy, P. Diddy. Everyone thinks this guy has all the dirt on all the people, and he may. But what I can tell you about P. Diddy is that many will think that he is the top of the pyramid, but what I'm here to tell you is that he is the tip of the iceberg. This is a common practice. Blackmail is a very common practice by evil people, and unfortunately, evil people occupy every position of power throughout the world, especially in this country. P. Diddy by himself was a rapper, a producer. He produced many successful hip-hop albums. You can look at all of his record labels, his clothing brand, his alcohol brand, very mediocre. Yet he was extremely famous, influential, and powerful. He's mentored Usher, Justin Bieber. He's very close with Jay-Z, Beyonce. Michelle Obama has been to many of these Diddy freak-off parties, along with Barack Obama, Bill Clinton. I'm going to stop naming names because I want to keep this video line going. But the list literally goes on and on. But again, not the top of the pyramid, just the tip of the iceberg. Now, he's on suicide watch right now, and the charges against him are sex trafficking, sex crimes, crossing borders, which means that he was essentially a sex trafficker who would hijack someone's life, use them as a sex slave, and then transport them throughout the country so other people could use them as a sex slave. Let me make it very simple for you. This includes people of all ages, genders, races, all types of crossing different lines of economic status. His lineup of people who he is directly connected to stems far beyond the United States into some of the largest prime ministers of nations that many people support. And I think what we're going to find in this is that this is a breaking point to a much larger, this is a huge straw that breaks a very big camel's back in some capacity, or this is going to fade away like Epstein. Those are the only two choices. So right now, people are digging online. There are literally people dedicating their lives to making sure that they can put together some dots for you so you can understand what's involved. I advise that you look into that. Now, there are video and audio of him, oh boy, this is a tough topic to talk about, having gay sex with pretty much every rapper in the industry. So think about the deception. The music industry, I talked about this before. Music in its original design, when music was first created, music was designed to create a feeling of love between you and the creator. That's how music was created. It was beautiful. It was designed. Look at hymns from churches. These are some of the earliest recordings, written recordings of songs. And they were designed to praise God, to make people feel good, to create a better society. So was all art. So was music and film and plays and drama. Now it's used as a way to create perversion, dissent, deception, and hedonism all throughout the society. And people like P. Diddy and all those who produce rap music, by the way, he's going to take the blame, but his biggest proponent, the person who put him in position, is a guy named Clive Davis. And if you don't know who Clive Davis is, go down the Clive Davis rabbit hole. Find out who he's associated with, what types of lineage they have, what countries they come from, where he could be a dual citizen of. Very interesting rabbit hole. What we're watching right now is we're watching a significant amount of people just randomly resign. Randomly resign. I just told you a few minutes ago that these positions of power, these positions as CEO of a record label or a music company or an entertainment company, they make 30, 50. Why would you ever quit a job where you make $30 to $50 million a year? Now, there's one side of me that says maybe they're on to greener pastures. Maybe they're just, this is the point in their career where they say, you know what, I'm done working for this company. I'm going to go start my own, or I'm just going to retire and see my kids. By the way, most of their kids are grown. It doesn't make any sense. The CEOs of Warner Music Japan, Sony Music Nashville, Nike, and probably the most interesting, the head of the police department of Dallas, where I live, he resigned. All these people resigned. This list is too long. I want to get this done. I have about 10 minutes left before I have to go watch my daughter cheerlead at a football game. This list is extensively long. Extensively long. I'm just giving you some very basic, like the CEO of Nike. Why would he retire? Oh, maybe he was at a Diddy party. The head of the Dallas Police Department. Why would he just suddenly retire and decide to move to Austin and do something different in the police force? I don't know. Maybe he was protecting a guy named T.D. Jakes who pretends to be a preacher, because T.D. Jakes, a preacher, a Christian preacher, was all over the Diddy files. All over it, mentioned multiple times in that lawsuit. And he will not be the last one. Almost every religion, every government, every way of controlling and manipulating society has been hijacked by people who do not serve God. They actually serve the opposite. And we're starting to watch this unravel. What you're going to see is that the owners of sports teams, the owners of corporations, the heads of states, presidents, prime ministers, congressmen, senators, the list can go on. Venture capitalists, bankers. There is such a deception in this world, and it stems from somewhere. Like Mark Cuban's, that's not his real name. Mark Cuban's real name is not Mark Cuban. Look it up. Bill Gates didn't invent computers in a garage. He wasn't some poor kid out of nowhere who invented computers, which is the story that you hear. He is actually the son of the founder of Planned Parenthood. This is a wealthy man. They hijack stories. They tell you, rags to riches stories. But the person who goes rags to riches is never actually from rags. They're from the riches, making you think that you can escalate up that ladder. George Carlin put it very eloquently in one of his comedy skits. It's a big club and you ain't in it. And that is the fact of America today. I can speak to this because I'm an entrepreneur. I have been down these roads. For years, I couldn't figure out how that guy got $100 million in financing from these groups, and I couldn't get a penny from him. Well, that person has no soul and is completely corruptible. That has a lot to do with it. Corruption and blackmail run decision-making in almost every nation in the world from positions of power. Diddy, like Epstein, had cameras all over everywhere he lived. If anyone did anything and by the way, Hugh Hefner in the Playboy Mansion also, these are what's called CIA honeypots. They are designed to get people drunk, on drugs, and having sex on camera against their will to use that information against them later. Is it all starting to make sense to you now? This is how you get bills passed that no one can understand why we would ever pass them. This is part of the problem. We have a serious honeypot issue in this country and around the world. And I can only imagine, and I will only imagine, what is on those tapes. Another breaking story from this is everyone's favorite American sweetheart, the high priestess Kim Kardashian, was heavily involved with P. Diddy, looking for documents and secret information to blackmail other people. This is in court documents for someone who is now incarcerated, who will not receive freedom through bail until his trial is over with. This is no longer a conspiracy theory. 3 to 5 years ago, if you talked about these things, it was absolutely taboo. You were crazy, and it didn't make. Is it all starting to make sense now, America? Are you starting to understand why they put tampons in boys' bathrooms? Because there's a higher agenda. If you think Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, you are a fool. The richest people in this world never want their name known. You will never know their net worth, and you will primarily never know that they even existed because they've made that net worth off the backs of sin, and that's how they continue to make their money. So as this P. Diddy lawsuit, trial, whatever you want to call it, unfolds, be very prepared for names that you thought were good people to be fully exposed. Almost everyone in Hollywood was connected to him. He is not, again, I will repeat this over and over, he is not the top of the pyramid, he's the tip of the iceberg. Over and over again, you should understand that. The problem doesn't end with Epstein, it doesn't end with Diddy, it doesn't even end with someone you think is the richest person in the world or whoever they know. It ends when those who hide in the shadows, who control the entire world, are exposed, and this is a very good step in the right direction. Though I don't really have much confidence that we'll ever know who those people are yet. Now, there are very big indicators that this could be a very strong possibility in the future, but as we sit here today, I'm cautious on being optimistic, and more importantly, I am forever in prayer for those who've been wronged in these situations, because I've seen, I don't pump out massive amounts of data to people, and I have seen hundreds of videos from these Diddy parties that have been leaked, and it is horrifically disgusting stuff. I think one of the most earth-shattering things people are going to find out is that all of these tough guy rappers with tough guy personas, that they're all gay. All of them. No one in this country, especially in entertainment, movies, TV, music, that all is an approval process. The most talented person doesn't win. Whoever wins gets the approval of the kingmaker. And in rap, in particular, Diddy was one of those kingmakers. And you didn't become a king with him unless he was a king with you. So I would be very prepared moving forward for some disgusting news coming out that needs to be shared. America needs to hear these things. We need to understand that those who are most corrupt in this world are in charge of the entertainment, the programming. Like, put it simply, programming, movies, TV, music, entertainment, all controlled by these types of people. Now, may not have an impact on you. You know, I'm in my 40s. A movie, or I can just turn a song off, certainly impacts the next generation and the generation after that. So I'm hoping that this becomes a big earth-shattering event, that people start to realize that maybe the world is not as it seems. So pretty heavy topics on a weekend edition here. I'm going to be breaking down. Stay patient with me in October. I'm going to be, I'm hoping by the end of October, probably closer to right after the election, I'm going to be putting together something no one's ever done before, a step-by-step historical guide from 1871 to today to explain all the nuances in history that have happened, that have changed the world and led us to where we are today. Because if we don't understand our past, we will never be able to change our future. So from that day to this, to all of the end of our days, I hope that all of you enjoy your weekend. I hope you spend as much time with your family as you possibly can. I hope that all of you find just 10 minutes a day for God. Walk in the woods, go outside, get some sun, pray to him, talk to him. These are going to be very trying times moving forward. I estimate, and this is just my estimation or my guess, that we are going to see, as soon as the interest rates changed, I put out a post and I said, this is going to be short-term bliss followed by long-term pain. Find yourself in different areas. Go to gold, silver, Bitcoin, raw land, oil and gas, trade the VIX. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think it's a great methodology for what's coming down the pike. There are going to be generational opportunities. That's money. That's the earth. That'll protect you. Use your riches on earth, as he says in Luke 16, to buy friends in heaven. Do good things in your life. Support good causes. Teach your children about faith. Faith is lacking from society, and it's going to cost us dearly if that continues. But more importantly, just keep your heart open to God. Let God pour into you. Let him give you a peace that surpasses all human understanding, because the next few months, maybe the next couple years in America, are going to be very crazy. I think we'll see this greed in the stock market end up turning out the same way it did in 2000 and 2008. So don't fall victim to that. More importantly, don't fall victim to all the horrible things you're hearing in the news. You need to hear them. The world needs to hear them, because with every single horrible thing that you are hearing or seeing, that is another thing that has been hidden in the darkness that is being brought to the light. That term we use all the time. It was brought to the light. Bring it all to the light. Let humanity deal with it. Let humanity change for the best. Stay faithful, stay humble, and stay hardworking. These are not times to give up. So from this time to the next time, my name is Eric Rice. This is the Rice Report. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless this country. We'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.